Hello, BookTube. All right, we're back for video 2 of our Q&A. We're starting with Nathan Fong. First, congratulations, Steve. I suspect no ads, interesting content / conversation may have something to do with it. Authenticity matters. Question, have you ever come across a book you were not commissioned to review, but impressed you so much that you just had to spread the word? Yes. Yes, of course I have. Many, many, many times. I review things all the time that I'm not commissioned to review. Open Letters Review, for instance, and Open Letters Monthly before that was entirely voluntary. I also had my literary blog, Steve Reads, forever and ever, where I would review anything, old, new, in print, out of print, to my heart's content. Yeah, I don't need to be commissioned to sing something's praises. And question number 2, have you ever had a dangerous dog encounter? Sometimes. Always by accident. It's never the baby's fault. They're either acting in instinct, they don't recognize me, they don't get any kind of vibe off me until it's too late, or they're maddened by some other thing. It never lasts for long. I've been bitten, including just recently, just a couple of years ago. I was walking Frida on the sidewalk, and we came across a guy walking an enormous dog. And the guy let the dog approach Frida, so I assumed all was well, and the dog and Frida were touching noses together. And then I saw the warning signs that the dog was about to attack Frida. That the dog was, in fact, not socialized correctly. And I pulled Frida back, and I had a split-second act. I pulled her back and interposed myself in the way while the dog was in mid-leap, and his teeth landed on my thigh, poked holes in my pants, poked holes in my skin, left a big bruise on my thigh. And even when he was already doing that, he was canceling that activity. Even when he was doing it, he was regretting it. And when I saw that I had been bitten by a dog, I was, for a moment, toweringly furious. Not at the human. That came later. But at the dog, you don't get to do that. You don't, if you're a canine of any kind, not just Canis familiaris, but any canine, you don't get to do that. And dogs know that. He knew that. He flattened himself on the ground in abject apology. And that was just a second. I just needed a second to realize it was an accident, that he's just not socialized. Better that he bite me than that he bite Frida. All that sort of thing took a second. It was anger at the owner that made that encounter something that I regret, and that I must never lose my temper with humans. Never. But yeah, I've had negative, dangerous encounters with dogs, but they don't last. They only last a few seconds. It's only misunderstanding. Never the baby's fault. James Holder says, congratulations. My question, what brought you to Texas during your travels? Any interesting Texas stories? I went to the University of Texas at Austin to help a friend who was taking summer classes and was having trouble. And I was free to do it. So I went to Texas. I got off the train in like 300-degree heat, and it was monstrously brutal. I had a key to his place, and he was at practice. He was a football player. He was at practice until nightfall. And I opened the door to his place, and it was unbelievable. It was like something out of Mad Max. It was just mountains, literal mounds of empty beer cans, empty beer bottles, soda pop bottles, pizza boxes, often with rotting pizza inside, crusts and whatnot inside. Just mounds of it everywhere, so that you had to walk over it or through it to get anywhere. I was stunned in the doorway, and I thought, okay, well, you're not getting back on a train. You're here for the summer, and you're already miserable. You're already hot and grimy, so you might as well clean. So I did. I started cleaning. I found trash bags and started filling them with beer cans and beer bottles and moving them out. And after a while, there was room to move, and I thought I would tackle the pizza boxes. So I was twining them up, and while I was doing that, I could hear skittering in the apartment. And it was always just at the end of my attention. But as I moved on, the skittering got more pronounced, and I knew that I was not alone in the room. I thought, oh great, so this kind of a mess has attracted either cockroaches or mice or rats. I confess, I didn't know a lot about Texas biology at the time, so I wasn't sure if any of those were a part of, if you could expect those in a Texas apartment if you left rotting food all around. But one way or another, I kept going. And at one point, I was clearing stuff off the couch, which was covered in garbage, just covered in garbage. Perfectly good couch, covered in garbage. When I heard something skittering directly underneath me, under the couch. And like an idiot, I bent my head down, upside down, to look directly underneath the couch, and sure enough, there was a black shape under there. And all I could see were bright red eyes. And I bolted into the middle of the room. The shape and I both went, and then I thought, well, it didn't attack you. It's way too big to be a mouse. It looks too big to be a rat, but it didn't attack you. You're probably not in any danger. I didn't have any dogs with me, or I wouldn't have worried at all. Instead, what I did was start to leave out little crumbs of pizza, leading from the edge of the couch to the middle of the room, to see if I could lure the creature out, to see if I could convince it that I'm not an enemy. And sure enough, I eventually did, and it was an armadillo. My friend had found an armadillo while jeeping out in the chaparral or whatever and taken it in as a pet. Fashionable thing to do at the time, but he, of course, wasn't suited to have a pet. He was a gigantic slab of brainless, beautiful meat. So the thing was living off whatever armadillos can scrounge. It couldn't leave, so it was just living off whatever happened to be around. That seemed horrible to me. And when my friend came home, I said, you know you have an armadillo living here? And he said, oh, did you find him? Yeah, I'd lost track of him for a while. I read him the riot act. And then I went to the library, because we didn't have the internet. I went to the library to find out what armadillos eat. And I found that out. I went to a garden center and got a whole bunch of stuff, a fishing tackle shop, found a whole bunch of stuff the armadillo could eat. Eventually won his complete trust so that he knew that I meant him no harm at all. Made sure he had plenty of water, found out that he loved to bathe, that he loved to just float in the tub. That was a lot of fun. And then when you put him in the sink and you put a nice gentle flow of warm water coming out of the faucet, he would raise his little stubby clawed fingers because he was so happy. And we named him Ruby after the man who shot JFK, and he became very happy, became very contented in that space. That's probably my weirdest Texas story. All the others are just me looking for used books, sometimes with Ruby in my backpack. Let's see here. Abirami says, questions from an aforementioned lurker. What are your thoughts on V.S. Naipaul's books? Do you have a preference between his fiction and nonfiction? Can you tell us why? Well, I prefer his nonfiction, and the why is because nonfiction is better than fiction. I like House from Mr. Biswas, but most of the rest of the stuff that I like is his long, admittedly windy, literary ruminations. Those tend to be more enjoyable for me. M457ERCH33F. Might want to work on that. Steve, what do you think about the masterpiece Red Square? I think it is stunning and displays a vast array of artistic skills. Bit of a troublemaker, aren't you? This person is referring to a piece of art that if you wanted to buy right now would cost you millions of dollars. It is a canvas stretched over a backing, sprayed red. Not swirls of red, not patterns of red, not images in red, just the color red. Pretty much singly embodies everything that I hate about the modern art movement. Pete's Pensive says 10,000, very well deserved. But is it? My question, in thinking about people of the past, either individuals or societies, from before your lifetime, when do you feel closest to them? Is it when you read nonfiction history about them? Or when reading or writing historical fiction about them, or visiting places they lived, or meeting their descendants, or reading things they wrote, or something else? I'm glad you got to reading things they wrote. That is the way. If someone wrote something, there's nothing better than that. That's when I feel closest to the person, especially if I know the chain of connection is relatively clean. Mayberry Book Club, another great booktube channel, says, congratulations, what is your favorite essay by David Sedaris? And then he appends JK, which is a Twitter abbreviation from when Twitter had 120 characters, stands for just kidding. A lot of other Twitter abbreviations stem from the days when Twitter had 120 characters. They all made us sound like idiots to use them. And Twitter doesn't have that limit anymore and is going in the direction of not having any limits at all, so we don't need to use these anymore. I just started a new job working customer service at a big retail store. When you worked retail, what did you think of customers who were unnecessarily rude or nasty? How did you handle being treated as if you were inferior? Okay, well, the first thing here is a point of detail. There's no such thing as unnecessarily rude or nasty. All rude and nasty is unnecessary. There's no such thing as necessary, rude and nasty. But I'm not sure that my experience would help you if you're looking for pointers, because when I worked in retail, for the bulk of the time, I worked the information desk of a big, busy retail bookstore in the pre-internet days, when the knowledge of, when employees' knowledge would actually be useful and non-duplicatable on the part of the customer. And it quickly became true that I would sometimes develop a whole line of my own, that the information desk, the store, would have one line and I would have another. And it became obvious to management that most of the people in that line were going to buy a lot of books because if I recommended something, they would buy it. All of you talked about what a danger I am to your TBRs here on BookTube. Imagine how much worse that would be if you were listening to me in person in a bookstore and I was putting the book in your hand. You'd be in the poorhouse in no time. That made me essentially unfireable. So when a customer, every once in a while, a customer would come up to me and be rude, just out of the gate. Just, you're a bug. I'm soiled that I even need to talk to you. You're a shop clerk. But nevertheless, I need to know where something is, so I have to talk to you. And I put them in their place immediately, just immediately. I was usually eager for the conversation that could happen, but not on those terms. No, the first thing I did was get rid of those terms. You know, I'm a professional working this job. You might be confusing me with kids behind the counter at Filene's or whatever, but I actually know a lot about the subject that I'm talking about with you. So, and you're here to get that information. You're here to get that expertise. So let's have parity, or don't. Let's have parity, or you talk to somebody else, but not me. And not only is that right. So managers who heard me do that, it didn't happen that often, but managers who heard me do that would say, well, yeah, there's nothing that I can say. This was in the pre-21st century days when the customer could be wrong. Not only that, but it often worked. Often those customers would sort of blink like they were coming out of a dream and say, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, what I'm looking for is, and great conversations and sometimes friendships would result. So, but only because I had that freedom. I'm not sure that you would, and I wouldn't want to give you pointers that would get you fired. In the 21st century, you don't have any recourse whatsoever. Your employer is looking for a chance to fire you. So I don't know what to tell you, except don't let it get to you. I know that sounds dumb. That sounds very bland, but don't let it get to you. When you're working in retail, the number one key thing when working in retail is that you have to be able to slough it all off your back when you walk out the door at the end of your shift. You have to. If you're taking any of it home with you, then whatever you're getting per hour is already highway robbery, but you're actually paying. In that case, you should absolutely not let it get to you. It's a tough line to walk too, because you don't want to let it get to you, but you want to do great work. You want to let it get to you, but you don't want to be one of those just sarcastic, the comic book guy in the android's dungeon in The Simpsons who doesn't let it get to him because he's made himself a jerk. You don't want to be either one of those things. That probably didn't help much. Elisa Cocciarelli says, what's the best way to absolve of bookish insecurity? Do I have to read everything in the ocean like you do? No. You shouldn't have bookish insecurity at all. No, reading everything in the world, reading, like, for instance, every detail of a canon, a literary canon, or reading all sorts of new releases the way I do is only a personal choice. None of this should lead to insecurity of any kind. The key is for you to enjoy what you read. So no insecurity. Doesn't enter into it at all. You don't have to read anything. And the Booklectic says, that's my guess. The algorithm has suddenly decided to suggest you more. I'll have to think up a good question to ask. What could be? I don't see it, though. Joe Law 13 says, Steve, what are your thoughts on Tom Wolfe? And why did new journalism die so quickly? I love Tom Wolfe. I think he wrote fantastic books. And I think new journalism died quickly because it needed him in order to be alive. Otherwise, it's just fiction. Otherwise, you don't have anybody sort of dressing the part and making a distinction where there is none. I'm glad to see it gone, definitely, but because too often when it was around, it became an easy symbol, an easy shorthand for good journalism, and good journalism already exists. Doesn't need to be called new journalism. Shauna Mckelly says, hi, Steve. What is the best new channel you've found since the pandemic started? Thanks for sharing your bookish life with us. I found so many. I don't keep track of when I found them and where. I find new channels all the time, BookTube and non-BookTube. I should make a whole video about stuff I watch that isn't BookTube. I'll have to put that on the list. Ruby Taylor says, hi, Steve. I don't have a question. Just wanted to say I'm so happy for you and you deserve this. Do I? Really? Funnily enough, I found your channel through the drama a few years ago, and I thought it was a bit ridiculous and overblown, and I clicked on another one of your videos and knew they'd completely misrepresented who you are as a person. Yes. In this one instance, I'm not trying to be egotistical, but yes, that drama, that hashtag gate, really did misrepresent who I am. I'm not doing any kind of protracted, desperate damage control like a number of people said back in 2016. I'm not trying to present some new airbrushed version of myself that isn't the horrible, damaged, sexist, misogynist monster that they made up. No, I've been consistent, not only through all these years on BookTube, but through lots of other years when there was no BookTube, when there was no YouTube. So thank you. Thank you very much. And Ruby Taylor ends by saying, Australia sends its love. Thank you. I have never been to Australia, and I never will be. A whole continent of dogs, dingoes, that I will never meet. I will never face smooch with them. A Cruel Reader's Thesis, another very good BookTube channel, says, congratulations, well deserved. Is it though? Really? What is the best theater experience you've ever had? What's the best concert experience you've ever had? Best theater experience would probably have been Shakespeare. I've had a number of magical Shakespeare moments in theater experience. I saw a great great performance outdoors of A Midsummer Night's Dream, of The Tempest, that was fantastic. But I also saw a performance of, I think it was Macbeth, at a regional company in the American Midwest a long time ago. And at one point I think at the second act, the main speaking character lost his lines. You could see it happen. I was close enough to the stage. You could see it happen where he suddenly lost his lines. And it was a small company. There was no prompter backstage. There was no prompter in the proscenium. There was nothing. He lost his lines, but he knew what his character was saying in that moment. And instead of just saying it, just reverting to normal English and saying the words, he invented his own kind of Shakespearean patois. And it worked. Amazingly, it worked. It wasn't the famous lines, but it felt perfectly in place in the play. And you could see in his eyes, he was looking at the other person sharing the dialogue, and you could see in his eyes that he was worried. He was apologizing with his eyes. And the main reason he was apologizing, and if you've done theater will know, is because he was not going to be able to give that person their prompt. When you're sharing a scene with someone, you're not so much listening to what they say. You're listening to the word at the end that is your prompt to start. And this guy didn't know that prompt. He was making up his own stuff. And the other person in the dialogue, you could see in her eyes that she knew she wasn't going to get her prompt. And that threw her off. And she lost her lines. And she responded when he was done with her own Shakespearean patois, so that they were continuing the scene without Shakespeare. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. I've never seen the like of it. And they ended. The third person, the person who walked on, knew their lines, and that ended the scene. And when they were off stage, the audience burst into applause. And I was glad of that, because they must have gone backstage thinking, I am the worst. I am a complete failure. And then they heard the audience just erupt in laughter and applause, and that made everything. And also made the night really special, because people knew they'd heard something that will never be reproduced. It'll never happen again. I don't know. I think the same thing might be true for my favorite concert moment. It was a long time ago. I was listening to a Soviet pianist named Lyubov Timofeeva. I don't know if she's still alive. I have no idea. I don't want to presume to call her dead. But she was doing just a normal program, and the main thing was the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto. And I've interviewed many concert pianists who have played that piece, and when the interview's over and we're just talking over wine, they would say, yeah, I don't even pay attention. I'm going over my household accounts, or I'm obsessing about something my lover said just before the concert, and I'm trying to come up with great comebacks. And yes, I'm theatrically bobbing and weaving, and yes, my playing is technically impeccable, but I'm not there at all. I've done this so many times. I'm not paying any attention whatsoever, which is always a little jarring for me to hear from these people. And I am sure that if Lyubov Timofeeva had ever given an off-the-cuff interview with a little wine or vodka or whatever, she would probably have said the same thing. But in this performance, that clearly didn't happen. In this performance, somehow or other, right at the beginning, in fact, not right at the beginning, the opening, I could tell that she was on autopilot. She was really good, but she was on autopilot. And then I could almost tell the moment when that changed, when something happened. And suddenly she was feeling the ecstasy of the piece the same way she was producing that ecstasy in the audience, and it was unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I don't think, in that particular venue, I don't think I've ever heard a standing ovation that went on as long. And this was a crowd of people who knew the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto backwards and forwards. They had heard it as many times as the pianist had played it, and they'd never heard it like this. And again, it was a sense of this cannot be duplicated. This will never happen again. Lots of other tedious stories, but those we'll have to do. Scrub TTT says, "Hi Steve, are there any books focusing on fascist movements in America that you would recommend?" I'd recommend Jared Yates Sexton and Sarah Kendzior. They're both great on the current situation in America. And also the Proud Boys on the White Ethno-State, a thin book. I forget the name of the author. She did a great job, though, of analyzing that. And what are your thoughts on The Sound of the Mountain by Kawabata? It's great. It's fantastic. I don't have a copy of it. I don't think I've seen one in forever. It's a fantastic study of family and of the patriarch of the family who is suddenly realizing that, I've devoted myself to my job, to my work, to the stereotypical outward appearances of the things I need to do with a family and children and respectability and all that. But now I'm realizing that that's it. This is all. And I'm not really invested in any of this stuff. And maybe I should, and it's very awkward. It's very awkward to do that. Terrific book, even in English. Like I mentioned, I don't read it in Japanese, but even in English, I forget whose translation it was, but I loved it. I'd love to read it again. I love all of Kawabata. Again, I don't have any Kawabata at the moment. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Books I'm not reading, another very good BookTube channel. Steve, congrats. I wish we could celebrate in person. Very happy for you. Yes, celebrating in person would be great if it were possible. I would have you and Jason over here on the first train. And just welcome to get a B&B in the neighborhood on me. And we would just have a ball for a whole weekend. Leo Percara says, do you have a recommendation of books about military conquerors, either biography or history? Well, there are a whole bunch of great biographies of military conquerors, but a book on just the phenomenon of a military conqueror, nothing off the top of my head. I'd have to think about that. Closest thing I think of is The Mask of Command by John Keegan, but that's not all military conquerors. Some of those just are military, just generals. Delcia Garcia says, congratulations on another milestone. I enjoy your channel very much. Why, thank you. As Leapy Channel says, I would like to know if you have any favorite finds/gems from Project Gutenberg. No, not really. I love collecting books from Project Gutenberg. I have hundreds of them. For those of you who don't know, it's a website where it's carefully curated, well designed, DRM-free ebooks of classics and canonical stuff that's out of copyright that isn't classics. You can get virtually everything of the 19th century on Project Gutenberg, and so much of it is so good that you've never heard of. I love, when I have the time, I love going to the search bar of Project Gutenberg and just typing in essays, book reviews, books, and just see what comes up. It'll be the famous stuff at first, but then if you go a couple of pages in, you'll get to authors writing about books that you've never heard of. And I love that. No one or two gems, though. Arto DK says, congratulations. Judging by how fast your channel has grown lately, you're on to 20,000 well before the end of the year, but I don't think so. It was a discrete burst. It was weird. I will figure out what the cause of it was, but it doesn't look like it's continuing. Excuse me. It doesn't look like it's continuing at that rate, so I don't think so. I hope not. And every new sev is well-deserved. Really? Are they? All I do is sit in front of a camera and talk. How is that well-deserved? You have a way of conveying your enthusiasm and wide knowledge about books that is very highly contagious. Okay. My questions. Number one, you have apparently traveled very extensively. You've said on multiple occasions that you've covered this or that country left and right. How many years did you spend traveling? Was it intermittent or not? Did you return home between these travel sessions? It was always intermittent. Sometimes I would find a place and stay for a while, longer than just, a day or 2 days or a week, but I always ended up coming back home. Yeah. And number two, have you always had godly reading skills, or is this ability you have consciously trained? The reading speeds are entirely a product of concentration, not sub-vocalizing, and lots of practice. That's all. I firmly believe that if you were locked in a room and you had nothing to do but read all day and no distractions, no pings from your social media, your speed would be mine. It would come up to mine. Carolyn Nixon says, congrats on 10K subs. I just discovered that BookTube is a thing. Don't know how I wandered into it, but the breadcrumbs led me to the Book Collectic, who gave a major shout out to you. I took her advice, checked out your channel, and found an interesting, kind, and humorous fellow book lover. I decided to stay a while. If you ever take a notion to, could you talk about how to find novels with main characters who are, let's say, retirement age or older? Well, thank you for the compliments. One book I would recommend, retirement age, right on the edge of retirement age, would be the Kawabata book that we just mentioned. But there are others. I'd have to make a list. That's another one on the list for starter kits. Flora says, congrats, Steve, well deserved. But is it? Is it really? Question number 1. Do you remember the first time you visited the Brattle and what your reaction was? I might not remember the exact time, the first time that I became aware of it. It was a long time ago, but I loved it. Of course, it was great. The Brattle, for those of you who are new, is a used bookstore here in Boston that I have a long relationship with. Number 2, I know this is a sensitive topic, but what do you think about the Woody Allen debacle? I believe he's innocent after reading up on it and watching several videos discussing the issue, but I know that it's difficult to wade through the discourse. I'm alarmed that we no longer really expect solid proof when we condemn these public figures. Yeah, I want to stress here that you don't have to believe that he's innocent. He is innocent because he hasn't been found guilty. He is innocent of everything except invidious commentary from children. What parent hasn't had that? He hasn't been convicted of anything. So he is innocent. You don't have to believe it. Whether or not you believe that he did anything wrong, okay, that's one thing. But I agree with you. It's horrifying that we have dispensed with the legal system to annihilate people. And even more horrifying that a bitter son can win the Pulitzer Prize and then spearhead a documentary designed to destroy you. I just, you're right, it's a sensitive subject. Number 3, lighten things up a bit. What does Frida think about cats? Does she simply ignore them? No, like I mentioned in an earlier question, she doesn't ignore them. She's not aggressive to them. She's not aggressive to anybody. She just doesn't like darting, unpredictable movement, which is what cats specialize in. A laid-back cat who is just interested in hanging out, walking around, and sleeping, I think Frida would have no problem with such a thing at all. Mary Tumulty says, congratulations on reaching 10K. Thank you. Question number 1, where and how were you introduced to the novels of Anthony Trollope? I don't remember where or how. A long, long time ago. And number 2, which Trollope novel have you enjoyed the most? That would be The Duke's Children. That's my favorite Anthony Trollope novel. On the flip side, which is the least enjoyable? Well, he wrote a lot of books that aren't all that enjoyable, where he's just grinding his gears, and there's no inspiration involved. Linda Tressel is a little novella that I always think of in this regard, although there are others like it. And are we done for this 30 minutes? Yeah, let's stop here and go on to the next one.